the friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
To get the Crime Writers on Aftershow right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And this week, the drugs flowing through this Texas border town are controlled by one colorful trafficker and the county sheriff. We'll review the podcast Witnessed Borderlands. Plus, they were the women who trailed, tracked, and tried a Parisian serial killer. We'll discuss the French documentary, The Women and the Murderer. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime co-author, TV journalist, host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and tech genius, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, author of Dead on Deadline, and best-selling local raconteur, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Rebecca. Yeah, I'm still holding the #1 spot at Water Street Bookstore, so we'll see.
I do have a question for you. I'm going to ask it in just a minute. And finally, our captain of woke cynicism, the author of the City trilogy of novels, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast about UFOs, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
Laura, I hear you're scouting out locales for murder locations for your next book, and you're asking people like, can I murder somebody in your yard? How is that working out for you?
Actually, I'm getting a very favorable response to those questions. So, yeah, there's a vacant lot in town, and that's going to be where the body in book 2 is. Well, I was hoping it was going to be found. So I happened to see the property owner while I was out for my morning walkabout. And I said, hey, do you still own that lot? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, do you mind if I just kill someone there? He's like, go ahead. So
cool.
No further questions asked.
He's not worried about like how that will reflect on his future business or anything like that.
I don't think this guy really needs to worry about that.
Okay. Well, good. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, as somebody who just joined my local Chamber of Commerce,
yes,
even though I do not have a bricks and mortar business, I just thought it might be nice to, I don't know, sponsor like maybe a local T-ball team or something. I'm thinking about calling them the, Mike Hogs. I don't know. I can tell you, I do not think it would reflect well on my local business if there were a body found. Oh, maybe it would.
I don't know. I mean, I had breakfast with the chamber president the other day, and she's all for it.
Really?
She thinks it's like great tourism for Exeter. I'm like, all right, murder tourism. We'll take it.
It is true.
Can you fit a corpse in there with you guys?
I don't know. We'll see.
In our closet?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is true that there's an active volcano exploding on the Big Island in Hawaii right now, and apparently people are flocking there to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine that a fictional body might attract some as well. Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm on board with that. Toby, you doing okay over there?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
I see you're wearing your Free Adnan shirt. Good for you.
Yep. Doing my bit.
Good. Hashtag Free Adnan. All right. Let's start the program, shall we?
Let's do it.
Leading off.
He was a big-time drug trafficker, and he was impossible to miss. Black cowboy hat, tall, broad-shouldered, hulking. The rumor was that underneath his trench coat, he carried 2 Colt .45 pistols.
In the 1980s and 90s, the drug trade in a Texas border town was overseen by Robert Chambers, a hard-partying, guitar-playing, mountain lion-owning outlaw of the rugged West. While his competitors were plucked, Chambers always avoided the authorities.
The bottom line, Chambers was staying out of jail, And all the while, he was becoming a bigger, more sophisticated criminal.
There was one powerful man who had his back. It was Sheriff Rick Thompson. He ran the county as he saw fit, and he saw fit to manage the trafficking of drugs into Presidio County himself.
Rick told me in our conversation, don't you understand that the good guys need to be in control of the drugs?
I just want to repeat that. The good guys need to be in control of the drugs.
In the new podcast series, Witnessed Borderlands from Campside Media, host Rob D'Amico recalls the story of a drug runner and a crooked lawman who moved pot and cocaine through West Texas and how their alliance culminated in a botched billion-dollar coke deal. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from the first 5 episodes of Witnessed Borderlands. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Now, Laura, these are like the kinds of stories that you hear in this podcast that are like guys telling stories. Like that's this kind of podcast, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of those where you come in with these very entertaining accounts of these like outlaws in West Texas. And I mean, it sounds like fiction, honestly. You know, it sounds like a bunch of guys sitting around telling their old war stories of the times they got away with doing X, Y, and Z. It was very interesting, but I was kind of wondering, why are we hearing these stories now? I think that was sort of where I went from that initial observation.
Now, I have a question. Why do you ask that about this podcast, but not about a podcast like Suspect, which we reviewed last week, which, by the way, does not have a news peg for now?
Yeah. You know, I think this one, honestly, I think it got a little bogged down in the way that they broke the chapters up. And it just, I feel like Suspect, it was just so engaging to listen to, just the way that the narrative was structured, moved along in a way that kept you paying attention. Whereas this one, some of these stories went on and on and on, but that sort of lost me along the way, if that makes sense.
Toby, what do you think about the format? Because we really are essentially, this is a recall story, right? We're having people, and by the way, I do think it's interesting that both things that we're reviewing tonight are essentially recall stories where we have a set of characters looking back, remembering a thing that happened, which, you know, a lot of the things that we review essentially are, but both of these don't have action in the moment, you know, scenes. What do you think of the way that this one is formatted? You sent me a note, for instance, saying that this seems ready-made for a TV series. What do you mean by that?
I think what they do, which I think is the right choice for this, is that it's a bunch of character portraits almost, you know, and I think that's, you know, maybe part of what Laura was referring to when she's talking about the structure, which is you kind of get the setup and then you get these episodes that are really about the people rather than sort of moving the core story along. The podcast kind of lives and dies based on if you find that interesting, if you find these people's stories interesting and are willing to sort of enjoy those in waiting to find out what's going to happen with sort of the main plot line. And for me, I thought that was good because the whole plot hasn't been revealed, but the basics of it, which are larger than life guy in a small Texas town takes over the drug trade, and there's a corrupt cop who's also larger than life, and then there's some semi out of town guys who are coming in to try and take him down, and it's just these big personalities. But it just seems like that's a story that's been told a bunch of times. So really what you've got here, unless you're diving into these characters, it's just like, yeah, all right, sure, whatever. But I think the characters are interesting enough that it does make it worth listening to and sort of give it a little more depth than it would if it was covered. I mean, I kind of feel like we went from Firebug to Suspect to this, with Firebug having like the least characterization, this probably having the most. And I think a lot of people would say, well, Suspect kind of nails it by having not too much, you know, sort of the Goldilocks thing. But I thought this one did a pretty good job. I was pretty into the stories.
Kevin, there's a big action sequence at the beginning of this podcast, and I would argue that it's really the only action sequence in the podcast. What do you think about the pacing? Because we do start with basically like, you know, I thought it was like very Breaking Bad-ish the way this thing opens, and then it changes very much tonally after that.
Yeah, well, it starts off with probably the most dramatic open we've had in some time. A teen running away from a drug shootout involving his father.
And at that point, that man took my dad's pistol and shot holes on each side of his head in order to intimidate him.
By now, Lika was lying on the floor, hoping, praying the shooting would stop.
Then it does a good job sort of immediately of introducing us to the two main subjects, Robert Chambers and Sheriff Rick Thompson. And I think that sets it up really well. And then I feel like the next two episodes, they take each episode to sort of give the background and biography and character building of each one separately. So it's not until sort of episode 4 when we're getting back into, sort of the meat and potatoes of what happened. So I felt like, well, how do you do that? Because you certainly want to hear about the different folks. But should it have taken 2 episodes? It's different because you've got sort of 2 bad guys that you're looking at. Could they have done something differently? Done them all in one? Maybe instead of doing a dedicated episode for the biographies, could you have just told the story and then dropped in things about their background and we learned about their background throughout as opposed to all at once? I don't know. It just felt like if I were listening week to week and I got to episode 3, would I want to stick around for episode 4? And I don't know if I would, which is too bad because, 4 picks up again.
I got to be honest, surprised to hear the 3 of you say so many relatively positive things about the characters and the plot and the pacing of this, because I found myself thinking like we are basically hearing a chapter 1 of this drawn out over to me, 5 episodes of the podcast. I felt like there could have been a much better way to do this in a way. I mean, to me, it sounded like the most interesting parts of the story for me were told through the eyes of the women who sort of intersected with these men, because they sort of had the most inside look at how these men operated, how they really were. Otherwise, for me, it was sort of a tale of almost like nostalgia in a weird way. And maybe it's because I'm a woman. Maybe it's because I just can't really relate to a story about a macho guy in a truck who had a pet mountain lion and the cocaine trade, or I just don't care particularly, or when it's sort of in the backdrop of what we acknowledge as a very racist place and a very macho place. Why should I give a shit about this macho stuff? It only gets interesting for me when I hear from the women. Otherwise, for me, even when I hear from the FBI agents, I'm like, it just sounds like a lot of macho nostalgia and all the dudes sound the same. And tonally, it kind of sounds the same. And I didn't get any of the dynamism of the character development. To me, Thompson and Chambers, they sound like the same guy. It's like, I don't know. I'm actually really surprised. I mean, Laura, you're nodding.
I had the same reaction. I was like, which one are we talking about again? Because the stories, they're crazy stories, but after a while, they were all kind of similar in their craziness. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, well, okay, we've already heard about this person taking, bales of coke and doing whatever. But yeah, it did seem like Kevin was saying, need to be broken up in a little bit of a different way. But the women, for example, I thought that interview was really good with the woman who had been the assistant in the police department.
Yes.
Talking about the culture of misogyny and the bullying and how they tried to really freak her out by putting these graphic accident photos on her desk.
There had been a terrible, terrible car accident. It was a head-on collision, and it killed an entire family. And the pictures were really, really, really gruesome. And I think they expected me to scream and cry and run out the door. And I didn't. I just asked, do you want me to start a file on this?
I think that was just very telling about the culture overall between both the sheriff and the outlaw in terms of how they were all treating women at that time.
You know what I kept thinking, Kevin? It was an later episode we meet the DEA guy who was assigned to that area, right? It's like Hank, right? From Breaking Bad. That's all I could think about, right? He gets assigned there. He's by himself and he's like, oh, wait, I can't do this by myself. To me, that's the story structure. If I walked into the room and I heard all of this material, I would have been start there. Start with him walking into this town, into this situation and being shit, this is what's going on, and then unwind it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Because it's almost like starting from the beginning and being this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Then the DEA guy arrived and he was like, oh shit, what do I do? If you start with the DEA guy arriving and being oh my God, wait a minute, the sheriff and the guy who's in charge of this are in it together with the cartel? Like, to me, like you're being dropped into Breaking Bad, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's one way of telling the story, right? I mean, you can start, and then all this stuff becomes a reveal. We learned in the first 10 minutes that the sheriff had something to do with the drug trade. If you don't learn that, maybe till the end of episode 1 or episode 2, that's another way of telling it, sure.
Yeah. So, Toby, you actually think that they made some good choices, as you mentioned, in terms of focusing on different players. Can you talk a little bit about the people telling the stories in the podcast? Because we do actually have a lot of very colorful characters doing some of the recounting here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's not much actual compelling true crime story, I don't think. I think it's really these people and who's telling the stories. And you've got a bunch of different people. You've got the lawyer. I can't remember what his name was, but he's...
The cat lawyer?
Yeah.
The cat meme guy.
Can you hear me, Judge? I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
Yep, that's Rod. He was the cat lawyer, 2021's viral internet sensation.
So what I guess I found interesting was that there does seem to be this sort of different sense of justice than I think what most people would think of. And so people are, I think, within that environment, everybody's kind of working on both sides of things. People are on the take. People who are involved in the drug trafficking are constantly either trying to become snitches or are snitches. And then there's this weird thing where they talk about the plane crashing and Chambers pulls some people out and saves them before the thing blows up with one of their buddies in it. And then the question is, well, does this make him a good guy? It's well, fuck no. I mean, seems like the least
We heard that he beat up women, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just it's very noir-y, right? I mean, it's just almost, deep Texas noir. I agree with you. There's a lot better ways to have framed it, but I think in the end, there's just not a ton there. It's not like a story. You're going to be oh my God, I can't believe that happened, or I can't believe this happened. It's no, you've seen it a zillion times, crooked cops and larger than life villains and the weird racial dynamics between the Mexican drug cartels and the Americans who are, trying to hone in on it or partners with them. So I think that's kind of the problem they have, probably, is they felt like they had these colorful characters to tell these stories, but what they all add up to, as far as the crime goes, isn't much. So you got to kind of lean on who these people are and what stories you can tell about them. And I think that's the value in this, whatever you think of it.
Now, Laura, you sent me a note that I know is not true. You said you want a pet mountain lion, which I know you don't, because that's not right.
I don't want a pet mountain lion. I thought that, but that
Carol
part of the
Baskin
story
will be yelling at you.
I know. No. Oh my God. I don't need that. No, I just thought that was the craziest detail. I mean, that was the only thing out of the ordinary in the outlaw stories for me. I mean, because I'm the rest of it, I'm okay, this, that, and whatever, drugs, women, rock and roll. But I'm mountain lion. How does one get a pet mount? I mean, I had a lot of questions.
If you pay some asshole $200 and you get a pet mount, we know that now. That's a thing you can do.
I was in Texas. I don't know. I mean, it was just almost didn't even seem real. It was such a ridiculous detail. Do you know what I mean?
You can get a mountain lion. I don't know if you can get a pet mountain lion.
Yeah. It'll be a pet when it's little.
When it's little, sure.
So, Kevin, you pointed out that Rob D'Amico did do this story for a very long time, right?
He spent 4 years on the story, yeah. And I know that, I got to give him credit, because when you start off and nobody wants to talk to you, to be persistent and then to wear them down and to get them on the record. I mean, everything having that judge talk about his experiences with the sheriff in the car, basically saying, maybe the good guys ought to be the ones selling the drugs.
There's certain people that are going to get drugs. And there are certain people that are going to supply drugs, and shouldn't the good guys, and that's what he said, the good guys supply them. And I told him, I don't care who supplies them. I don't want to have anything to do with it.
To Dale from the DEA, apparently, it took a lot of effort to get them. As someone who has been in a situation where you're trying to convince somebody that's reluctant to talk to you to do it, it's quite the feat in order to make it happen. So good on him for sticking with it and putting this together.
Can I ask you a question though? I'm not actually. This is not like a dig. I'm just curious because I found myself wondering because he does talk about one of the women that he finally talks to. It's like he's trying. They email, he talks to her, and then the judge too. And I wonder are they included because they're necessary? Or are they included because they were hard to get? You know what I mean?
Oh, I think they were necessary.
I know, but you ever find? I do find myself wondering. Listening to this though, like, were some of the things included just because Rob was so psyched to finally get it, or because it was necessary for this story? I mean, maybe it's because this story wasn't so much for me that I found myself asking those questions. You know what I mean?
I was about to say, I think that's exactly why you think.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I've gone through all your notes. Maybe it's time to do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Witnessed Borderlands? It is a relatively new podcast. Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for Witnessed Borderlands? Should our listeners check it out? What do you think?
Boy, I hate to do this. I'm going thumbs down. I really didn't find myself getting engaged with this story. And it's not that this isn't an interesting story. I just think the way that it was presented, as Toby pointed out, it was told more sort of character portraits. And you know me, I'm on the go. I like to hear a story that's kind of moving along at a little bit of a different pace. So for me personally, I wanted a little more context as to why now we were hearing this story. But I really just couldn't get into this. And I had to keep rewinding to figure out who I was listening to because a few of the characters started to kind of blend together, all those outlaws and stuff. So it's not like a huge thumbs down. I'm going to say thumbs sideways to thumbs down.
Toby Ball, what about you?
Yeah, I think I'm a thumb sideways. I think there are people who would like this. I think the stories, like Laura was saying, they kind of seem like fiction. It's just like kind of too much. That being said, I think it's all kind of not going anywhere. Like, as much as you know about what the plot is and what's going to happen, it's not super surprising or not something that you haven't seen before on the news or read before in a novel or whatever. So it doesn't suck. So I'd give it a thumb sideways.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm going a thumb sideways. It's not bad, but I do feel like it kind of lost some momentum, in the middle here. I like what we have for a basic story. It's good investigation, but it just seems like I can't really say that it's bad. There's a lot of good work that went into it. I just don't know if it's being told in a way that makes this really sing, because there's good bones to it, but, I don't know. I'm going to give it a couple of more episodes, but I can understand why folks might not want to, invest a lot of time in it.
I have to give this a thumbs down. It's Witnessed Boringlands for me. It is so boring. And honestly, it's structure. It is structured so poorly. Like, there's nothing interesting about the way this was put together. It starts with a scene, and then there are no scenes. I mean, every scene that's in this is just a person's story telling you something. That could be good, except that sometimes the stories are allowed to go on so long that any dynamism that's in the story is lost because the story itself then just gets buried in another story that person tells without there being any sort of narrative frame for the story that the person's telling. Toby said something to me that tells me like what this podcast could have been. Toby said the expression deep Texas noir. That is a frame. Like if this exact reporting had gone into a room, if Rob had come into a room with all of this tape and this 4 years of reporting, and he had an editor and a producer who were like, this is what we're going to make. We're going to use all of this material and all this great stuff you have, and we're going to make a deep Texas noir podcast. And that was the way they put it together. And we dropped this DEA agent in, and that was the first episode, and that was the frame where it starts with one of these women who like had this long relationship with Robert Chambers that started. We get to them when they're like, she's in her 30s, and that's when we meet them. But then we find out like we can rewind to like when she knew him when she was 15, and it's like this cool like Frank Miller-esque like noir, like that could have been really fucking cool. Like, there's so many ways this could have been cool, and like it's almost like every cool choice that could have been made, like the opposite choice was made. And honestly, like Laura, I found found myself rewinding again and again just to be like, who was this again? Who was this again? There are so many white guys in this who sound exactly the same, which does not benefit the podcast. And the writing for Rob does not help because it's just like, it's not clear. It's not helpful and it's not clear. So I'm sorry. Like, I really wanted to like this very badly. And I can't say that I did. So thumbs down for me for Witnessed Borderlands.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or a random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
All right, Kevin, here we are in the business section of the podcast.
Business section.
What do we've got going on in our Patreon Crime Writers On after show today?
Well, in this after show, we're going to go back in time.
Okay.
Not really go back in time, but we are going to have a discussion about some of our past reviews.
Ooh.
And think back to something that we might have given a thumbs up to.
Yes.
But now that we're older and wiser, or maybe we ended up watching all the rest of the episodes.
Yes.
If there are any thumbs up that we want to change to a thumbs down.
Okay.
Or vice versa.
All right.
We're also going to answer the question. Toby raised the question last week when we were reviewing John of God, which is about a Brazilian spiritual healer. And we were kind of lukewarm on it. Actually, I think we were all thumbs down on it, but I guess that's a nice way of saying that.
Very lukewarm.
We were very lukewarm. Toby asked, sort of rhetorically, he wondered how it played in Brazil. And so we have heard from one of our favorite Brazilian listeners who has some perspective on this story. So we'll be hearing from her in the after show.
Nice. What else have we got going on, Kevin?
Well, I want to let you know that we have a new episode of These Are Their Stories coming out this week on Wednesday. The episode is a classic. It's called Just a Girl in the World.
So weird.
And it's one where Lupo sleeps with the suspect.
So freaking weird.
And we find out that Van Buren has cervical cancer that her ex-husband gave her from giving her HPV.
We don't know that.
It's
she thinks
positive.
That. We don't know that. Who was our guest for that episode, Kevin?
Our guest was our friend Lonnie Diane Rich from
so
Shipperish Media, all the many podcasts that she does.
It was so fun taping with her, but that episode is so freaking weird. It's so freaking weird. And by the way, we do not know that that's how Anita Van Buren got cervical cancer.
I'm going to say, Rebecca, that's canon.
I don't get my medical advice from Law and Order. I'm just going to say it.
Well, I'll just say it was a fictional detective with a fictional disease that she got from her fictional ex-husband.
After meeting her fictional awesome new boyfriend.
Awesome new boyfriend.
Yes.
This kind of reminds me of that show that Toby watched with his son once about the guy who was had the STDs that was having to go back to all the past people.
Oh, yeah.
What was that show?
Scrotal Recall.
Scrotal.
I think they might have put it out with a different. I feel like I saw it somewhere with a different name, but at the time it was
what
called.
What channel's that on?
Scrotal Recall. I don't know if it was on Netflix or maybe it was on Acorn or something. I don't know.
You have a memory like a steel freaking trap, Lar Bricker. That was incredible.
I'm like an elephant. I remember everything.
Wow. Wowie, wowie, wowie.
And lastly, want to ask you that if you haven't already, sign up for our Crime Writers On newsletter. It comes out once a week. Very easy. All you got to do is just drop your email address in the little field at the top of our website, crimewriterson.com. You'll get information like behind-the-scenes info, summaries of our reviews, cat of the week, tweet of the week.
Special feature this week. me wearing my Crime Writers On ugly as fuck leggings.
Oh, we're going to get a photo? All right.
I received them in the mail. I plan to model them for the newsletter, and they are ugly.
Oh, no.
Mission accomplished.
What do they feel like?
They actually, they're from Threadless, so they're actually like pretty good leggings. They are, though. Kevin made the print for them custom. Like, they're not like Threadless didn't design this print.
Yes.
Kevin designed this print with our logo. Some of it's blurry, some of it's clear, some of it's big, some of it's small. Like, he on purpose made
just like our
a
shows.
Lula. Yes, he on purpose made a LuLaRoe style version of our logo.
So our logo looks like a penis on your vagina?
No, he didn't put anything in the crotch area, but it is on purpose absurd version. And I think you should put the when I model them, you should put the link to the leggings specifically so people can get a chance to buy them again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I'll get some. I will wear them
everywhere. You're going to see how amazing I look in our ugly ass fucking leggings.
Toby, will you wear them?
Do they make them for men, Kevin?
You can get the print on anything. So you can, the whole thing with Threadless is you can, when we make a print, you can literally get it on anything. You get the same print on a water bottle or on a t-shirt or whatever, right?
Or look what I made. Look what I got.
Oh yeah, look at that.
A mask, yes.
You know how many people bought those leggings?
How many?
One.
Me.
Yeah.
They're amazing. All right, Kevin, we should get back to the show. But before we do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Brooklyn Armesto Larson.
Yay!
And Ilya Gordon Redwine. Bless you.
Bless you. And thus ends the business
section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that out right now. Moving on.
What's going on? Put my daughter on. Then the man said, and I can still hear his voice, "No, madam, I can't put her on." I said, "Is she gone?" "Yes, she's gone."
The brutal 1995 murder of Parisian student Helene Gauthier haunted her mother, as well as the first female chief of the French crime brigade investigating the case. Martine Montiel noted that male DNA discovered at the scene matched that of samples from other unsolved cases in Paris.
We had to catch the scumbag who did this. We couldn't allow someone like that to run free. I'll be honest, we wanted to avenge them.
With no DNA database and an iffy police sketch, the investigation went nowhere. That was until a lab file-by-file search put a name to the suspect.
That's just appalling. A police reporter like me leaked the killer's name before he was arrested. That's not something you should do. You can't do something like that.
Now on Netflix, the French import The Women and the Murderer recalls the manhunt for a serial killer who terrorized Paris. What sets the documentary apart is that all the key players in the case are women, from the investigator to the crime reporter to the attorneys who argued both sides at trial. The result is a true crime story with a unique point of view. Now we are going to be talking about plot points for The Women and the Murderer. So to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down review. Laura, we got to talk about the location of this documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It is Paris, 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 Paris. I found myself very immersed. I very much enjoyed the style of this film, the way it was made. I don't want to be too superficial, but the clothing, the hair, the presentation, the gun lamp, the cinematography, the art direction. Did you find yourself just sort of being immersed in this the way that I was for this very, very short documentary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was kind of one of the first things I noticed is, as we're coming in at night over Paris with the light, it was reminding me a little bit of that opening sequence in the greatest crime drama of all time, Bron Bron.
Yes.
Where, we're seeing the city at night with the lights, and then we're sort of seeing the underbelly of that beautiful sort of nighttime scene. But, I think with this, there was just, right down to the police detective supervisor who is gorgeous, and she's super brilliant and smart. And she looks like a television detective or something. She's beautiful.
With her Hermes scarf and her gorgeous glasses and
yes.
Yeah.
But so that kind of went in combination with all of the location porn that we were seeing of Paris.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, you sent me a note, which I also thought, because we have here a lot of sort of iconic characters in a crime. We have the mother of a victim. We have a lead cop. We also have a reporter, a crime reporter, who you, like me, and I didn't know this until just now when I saw your note, was the Laura Bricker of this film.
I said a French Bricker.
Yes.
Yeah, good on this reporter. I forget her name, but for being 5'0" and playing dumb and naive to the cops, wearing her mini skirts and getting all the info.
Yes, but she literally was fake. Like she put on a persona, right?
She knew how to work it.
Yeah.
But she was also very persistent. And again, where we have a situation where in the 90s in France, we find out didn't have a lot of female police officers. Certainly not any supervisors. And here in the newsroom, didn't have a lot of female reporters working the crime beat.
Yeah.
And maybe those first two things play into each other. But in any event, they both happen to be involved in this case, as well as a female prosecutor and a female defense attorney. So it was, sort of this, confluence of happy feminist events, perhaps we could label it like that, where we get three French female pioneers in their fields, really, trailblazing in this one particular case.
Well, I found myself wondering, and Toby, I don't know if you were wondering this too, like, this case wasn't just manned by, I hate to use that expression, women. They just chose women to tell the story in this film. I mean, that's what my perception of this was that, like, we actually saw the lead defense attorney here was a man. The squad of cops was mostly men, but there was one woman on it. And, of
she was the boss.
Yes, but of course the mother of the victim was a woman, and we had the one female crime reporter. But there was a deliberate choice here to do this documentary through that lens. I actually thought that was an excellent choice, and I'm sad to say it felt like a new choice. I mean, it's 2021 for fuck's sakes, and it's like, oh my God, a brand new choice to tell the story of a true crime through the lens of only the ladies who were present during the story. Isn't that sad, Toby, that feels new and that would even be the title of the film? Like, it should not be extraordinary. We wouldn't think twice if all of these same characters telling the same exact story all just happen to be men. But, like, it's unique enough that they made that the name of this, right?
Sure. So I think the only part where it feels forced at all is, again, with the defense, in which it was led by the woman who was like the assistant's ex-husband, although I believe they were married at the time.
They were.
But even in that case, she's the one who had sort of the dramatic courtroom moment with the murderer who confesses in the immediate aftermath of this, like, Perry Mason moment. So I didn't really find very much in this. Like, I was watching it, I was like, all these people, like you said, can just sort of be summed up. It's like, oh, the victim's mom. Like, you don't know anything else about her. She's just the victim's mom. Oh, here's the first woman who ever, like, ran the crime squad for the Paris police. But that's all you know. Like, you don't know anything about how she came up, what obstacles she faced, what the reception was to her. It's just like, oh, this is her. This is her resume, with the one exception of the journalist, I would say.
But we do know that about the cop. We keep seeing all these newspaper clippings where it was like, cop in a skirt.
I mean, you get a little bit of that. At the time, I was like, so how did she succeed?
Yeah.
I mean, why did she get to be there?
Are you saying that this is one of the Netflix things that should have been longer? There are so many that we always say, like, should have been shorter. No?
I don't think this thing should have been made, quite honestly. I just don't think that, like, they try, I think, and make it more interesting by having this angle that it's all women. And I guess you can hang your hat on that if you want, because the only thing that's really that interesting about this story is this kind of Perry Mason moment during the trial. The rest of it, like, it's basically like, we can't figure out who did it. We don't know what to do, but we got this DNA. And then it's like, oh, well, we looked through a whole bunch of stuff and we finally got a match, and it's this guy. Then a couple of cops happened to see him, and then we brought him in, and he, like, lost it in the courtroom and confessed. There's no suspense. There's no, like, ticking clock. There probably was in reality, but you don't get the sense of that in the movie. It just kind of seems like it was, like, kind of ticking off some plot points to a real kind of crazy moment in a courtroom, which I'm sure you could go lifetimes without seeing something like that, but it happened.
Yeah.
But that's the only part of it where I was just like, oh, wow, that is nuts. The whole rest of it was like,
Toby, you haven't gone off like this in a while. Oh my gosh. This is like original Toby. But I have to say, I didn't hate that we had the angle of the women. At the same time that I was watching this, I was flipping back and forth and I started watching the Mrs. Fisher's Modern Murder Mysteries. And that show is all about badass women that like live in this house called the Adventurers Club or whatever. And so there's like, here's like the scientist woman who can do the, like all the testing. And here's the, lady who rides the motorcycle who's like 80. So I think I was like looking at this show maybe in a little bit of a different lens because I was coming from this other show where they were showing women in these positions where they were basically like badasses and kind of kicking ass at everything they did in terms of solving mysteries and beating the police and all that stuff. So when I was watching this show, I was thinking, you know what? I didn't mind that we had the police reporter and the investigator. And by the way, the police reporter had the best ashtray of any ashtray I've ever seen.
Yes.
The little typewriter ashtray. Wasn't that
so
awesome?
much smoking?
Is that better than the table lamp that
oh my God.
Cop had, which was made from a Ruger, I think?
The gun lamp was so amazing as she had it then and she still has it now.
Well, who's going to take it from her?
And also, like, by the way, these women, we would not comment, it is not fucking cool to comment on the way women look, right? But these women are from Paris, and women from Paris are famously chic, right? Like, that is a thing. Can we all just agree? Well, you can't because you're men and it's not cool. But, Laura, can we just agree these women are chic as fuck? And they look amazing, and their hair in the 90s looked amazing, and nobody's hair in the 90s looked amazing.
No.
But theirs did. I mean, they just did. They looked amazing. And they still look amazing today.
And then I can we talk about how they did the interrogation with the whiskey and jazz to get the confession?
Kevin, I'm curious as to what you think, because we are, progressive criminal justice reform advocates. I think anybody who listens to the show know that we do not believe in subverting the system, violating people's rights. There was no DNA database in France at the time these crimes were committed. There were laws and people were very much pushing against it because of privacy and so forth. And this detective, who I think we all agree that, we like, was like, fuck that. I want to catch this guy. We have a DNA. You're going to pull every fucking file and just manually look to see if you can find a match, which wasn't legal, basically. I'm just curious what you thought of that, because I found myself thinking, yeah, you go. And then I'm like, wait a minute.
What part wasn't legal?
I mean, that's my question. There was no database, but she also made it seem...
Which meant that they had to do it by hand, which they did.
Right, but she also said that, she implied that it wasn't kosher for them to do, but she also didn't say it wasn't admissible. It was a weird kind of, thing. She didn't technically say it wasn't admissible. Right? It seemed like it was shaky legally.
Yeah, I'd say, if she were a white sheriff in Alabama saying these things, we would perceive it very differently than being a progressive French law enforcement official, because she's cop through and through. I love how, she, couldn't have been bothered by this traffic accident that she had to go investigate, which was the fatal crash of Princess Diana. It just was they couldn't be bothered. They were this traffic.
It was so annoying.
Kept referring to it as the traffic accident because, they're looking for a serial killer. This is beneath them.
I have to admit it was very hard, a big weight, because the Serious Crimes Unit had a heavy workload, and we really could have done without a traffic accident.
I think, there's a great argument about, is there a need for a DNA database? And if you don't have one, this is what happens. A serial killer remains on the loose for another year or two because it took that long to go from file to file, holding up transparencies of, gene sequences to try to find the right one. When if you had a database that was fully stocked with a bunch of profiles, it might have taken 5 minutes to come up with the name. Who knows?
Yeah.
That's some compelling shit for a documentary, man.
What's that? Looking from file to file?
Yeah, just I guess we should have a freaking DNA database. It would be better if we did.
But that was something else that went by very quickly.
Yeah, and again, it's just like you said, there's pushback. I mean, I guess they showed us one television show with one or two people saying this isn't right, but you can find that about anything, I'm sure. So there's not really a sense, and why would France be particularly uncomfortable with that? Like, is there something about French culture that makes that so threatening? Like, there was a point at which they weren't testing blood that was given for AIDS because that was part of like French culture. I'm probably getting this slightly wrong, but I do remember
French listeners, email Toby. He always has questions about...
No. We actually, no, you're not crazy. We just did, for the Netflix podcast, what was an Unsolved Mysteries one about the woman who was shot in the hotel room. What country was that in? Was it Iceland or...
Belgium?
No, it wasn't Belgium. It was
person was from Belgium.
It was a Nordic country, right? Yeah. And whatever country it was, I want to say maybe Oslo. It was Oslo. So it was Norway. So there was this body found in this hotel in Oslo, and everybody wrote in to the podcast, as host of this podcast, interviewed the director, and everybody wrote in and they were like, oh, just put the DNA in 23andMe and you'll find the person in like 4 seconds, unidentified person. And it was like, no, that is illegal in Norway. Like, you're not allowed to actually upload DNA into a public database to solve a crime. It's actually illegal to do it. So there are still countries where not only is there no database, but it's actually against the law to upload DNA from a crime scene into a public database. Yeah, it's insane. I mean, it's not insane.
And it's crazy that we're so freaking uptight about just anything. And it's like, oh, sure, you can upload my DNA. Like, yeah. I'll pay you to do it. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm just listening to this conversation that we're having, and there's like the stuff about we need a database, and then you're talking about how nice the clothes are, and you know the the ashtray is cool, and the lamp looks really nice. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that was kind of what I came away from it is that there's just not a whole lot to bite into, right? It's just these different people talking. You don't know really much about them other than the role they play in this documentary. You know, it takes place in Paris, and they talk about the 11th arrondissement or whatever, but you don't know what that means. I mean, is that like upscale? Is it downscale? Is it places where there's lots of crime? Is it like really strange that there would be a crime there? So it's just, you know, at the end, it's just like, okay, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And then this really crazy thing happened in the courtroom, and we'll talk about it a little bit, and it's over.
Well, let's talk about that courtroom stuff, because it was bananas. First of all, they had the defense attorney, the woman who was with her ex-husband and the defense team, and then they also had essentially someone from the prosecutorial team, but she called herself the victim's attorney. They were in the courtroom together, apparently.
Doing the interview.
Yeah, but we didn't know they were together until they panned back. But then...
Why have them together, though?
Well...
Without having them interact. What was the point of that?
Well, I think we see that at the end. I mean, to me, the point was at the end.
No, we just see a shot that they were both there listening to each other. Why not have them interact at all?
I think it becomes clear at the end when we see what happens, because we know that he ends up confessing on the stand, and they end up kind of on the same side at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when that prosecutor, she doesn't just tell the story... She fucking acts it out. And we see the defense attorney reading from her closing argument like she is acting it out. But that prosecutor stands up and walks over and like acts out her Perry Mason moment. And it is fucking bananas. Laura, what did you think when you even just heard that story? I mean, you heard what happened there. By the way, should we tell our listeners what happened? Because it was in French and they may not watch this, right?
I was going to tell in my answer, because that was the part that I was just like, I mean, when you said it was a Perry Mason moment, it was like the fact that she was thinking that quickly on her feet as this was unfolding, because it didn't sound like this was planned. She basically is watching him like flips through something with one hand, and then she sees him use the microphone with the other hand. And there was something with the crime scene about somebody being ambidextrous. And so she starts
cutting his clothing off with the left hand. So she says the clothing was cut off with the left hand, but you say you're right-handed, right? And he says yes. And she says, but I just saw you flipping through the photos and moving the microphone with your left hand. Right?
Yeah. But just the way that she laid that all out, like just on her feet, like it felt like it was something that had sort of happened organically that wasn't planned out in her line of questioning. And then for him to be like, yeah, I did, or whatever.
That's my stabbing hand. The other one was my stabbing
hand.
Can
you imagine if you were in that courtroom when that happened? I was like, actually, I think that was really... was kind of a creative way to approach it, because how else could you have told that story with such an impact? Like, I felt like I was at like a dinner party with her listening to her tell this story, which she's probably told so many times about how this played out, you know?
She was 30. I just kept thinking that. Like, I kept thinking about that because she's really like the equivalent of like a young prosecutor, right? Like, she's working for the government. Like, she's not like in private practice. Just like, you know, in the public defender's office, you sort of get like young lawyers with these like jobs. They get like either jobs in the prosecutor's office, public defender's office, and they move on to private practice. She's 30, right? And she's just like, I have an idea. I'm going to ask him this question. And he's like, yes. And she's like, what? But you mean the hand you stab with? And he's like, yes. And the whole courtroom is like,
I don't know. I like
he's
that
like,
part.
damn it. Stupid.
I meant if I stab someone.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that.
If I did it.
So, Kevin, don't you feel like there were dropped threads about the evidence that didn't fit?
Yeah, I would have enjoyed 2 more minutes of them explaining the bad police sketch. It was bad. It didn't quite fit.
Later it did when he shaved his head.
His head, yeah, he's a little heavier than
What about Egyptian foot?
Egyptian foot is an interesting topic. Maybe it meant that he wasn't at all of the scenes that they are attributing to him, or that there was somebody else, but we get no explanation of that. Is that because it's inconvenient? Sometimes investigations and investigators get things wrong, and some of the evidence is bad and it doesn't really point towards anything. We don't believe that this is a wrongful conviction. He did confess, but beyond the DNA, on the stand. But beyond that, it's like, okay, so we just kind of left that dangling. I would have liked to heard a little more about, okay, well, how do you reconcile that? Even if the answer is like, yeah, you know, we don't know. It would have been nice to
like
not leave
maybe
it
like
there.
when someone's stabbing, sometimes their middle toe sticks out.
Yeah.
Or like maybe like that footprint could have been left there by
That
someone
footprint
else.
wasn't in blood, was it?
I don't know, but it was a bare foot,
Yeah.
right? Like, why were there no shoes on that person at that time?
It's got Egyptian toes. They don't make shoes for those kinds of feet.
Yeah, it hurts.
I also want to know why it's called Egyptian foot. Did they ever explain that?
I don't know. I've got that. Like my second toe is longer than my first toe.
Can
like
you take off your shoe and show us right now, Toby
it's
Ball?
fine. It's fine. Stop.
Oh, no.
Don't.
Oh, my God.
Oh,
Oh, my God. Actually, I've seen
shit.
Toby's feet. Because
Are
Toby
they?
wears Birkenstocks. I saw his feet in
my feet are
Nashville.
no prize as it is, but I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my second toe is like a fair amount longer than my. Like,
Sounds like
not
another
like I look like some kind of circus freak. But,
Sounds like another photo for the newsletter, Kevin.
Yeah.
In addition to the ugly leggings.
Egyptian
Oh,
toe.
What
Yeah,
Patreon
dude.
level is that?
You want to put that beyond. You want to put that below the. The
You know what?
preview.
It could be one of those photos where it's like blacked out, and then you have to click on it to see it. It would be like view at your own, like
Right, NSFW
yeah.
definitely.
Can we put an entry for Toby on Footopedia?
All right. Well, I think we should do what we do. Let's let our listeners know. Should they check out The Women and the Murderer? This is an import on Netflix from France. It's a documentary. It's fairly short. It's about an hour and a half long. It's about the manhunt and trial of a serial killer who terrorized Paris in the 1990s. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Women and the Murderer?
This is like a lukewarm thumbs up. And, you know, there's definitely issues with the narrative structure of this and everything. But, you know, there was some characters in this. First of all, I loved the setting in Paris. But just, you know, the character Patricia, the police reporter, Martine, the French investigator, who's the first woman to be in the supervisory role. I mean, some of these like badass French women characters for me were just worth watching. And it was only an hour and a half. So I would say, you know, give it a whirl.
What about you, Toby Ball?
I don't know. When it was done, I was like, what did I just watch? Like what just happened? So if it was my ideal thing, it would have been about 15 minutes long. It's not that interesting a story, except for the trial thing. I think they tried to do the thing with the women, and that's fine. It'd be awesome if there was a good story to put it around, but there's not. So I'm sort of a big thumbs down, I guess.
Kevin Flynn.
I am going thumbs down. I started to like it. I thought the early part of the investigation, the manhunt that we heard was really good. But once it got to the, Act 2, where it's the prosecution, just think like the whole thing lost the plot right there. It just kind of fizzled out, and the novelty of the entire dramatis personae being female speakers, like that novelty just kind of wore off, and it was like a pretty rudimentary crime story. So it didn't really do it for me. It's not really a great documentary. Thumbs down.
I'm a thumbs up. I liked it. I would have made the first half into the first 3/4 and the second half into 25% of the documentary. That's how I would have structured it to make it stronger. The trial scene is amazing. The initial chase investigation stuff with the cop who's in charge of the thing is really great. She's a great storyteller, and she's like your Olivia Benson, right? In Paris. Like, she's who you want solving your murder, and she's a really interesting figure. I agree with Toby that it would have been really interesting to hear a little bit more about her ascension to that role, and I actually do think this could have been a little bit longer if they had a little bit more material. One thing that I kept thinking when I was watching this actually would be a very good scripted series. And if this documentary had been given like a little bit of a scripted stories treatment where they had structured it as if it were a scripted series, it could have been actually like a really tremendous documentary, because the characters in this are so strong and the real people are like as attractive as the actors who would probably play them in a scripted series. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't like the best thing I've ever watched, but I really did enjoy it enough to give it a thumbs up. Yeah. So thumbs up for me for The Women and the Murderer on Netflix.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets. And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of
the week.
Larceny is in the eye of the beholder. Oh, I see what you did there. A Danish museum is angry with an artist who was given a pile of money to make a collage. Instead, he turned in 2 blank canvases that he entitled, quote, "Take the money and run." Jens Hanning was given $84,000 in banknotes to recreate an earlier art piece about a living wage. He declared on Danish radio, "The artwork is that I have taken the money." Known for his provocative pieces, Hanning says the submission is a call to all those in miserable jobs to do like him and take the money and run. The artist says the moneyless canvases do not amount to theft, merely a breach of contract with the museum, which was the point of the artwork. Meantime, the museum has not reported Hanning to the police and promised not to if the cash is returned when the exhibition is over. Panel, we blame the museum for providing the raw materials for this disaster. What other problematic works of art are they responsible for? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
I feel like it's like a performance art, and it involves like a game of Twister and some finger paint. And I just think that could go horribly awry.
Toby Ball, what do you think?
It's Geraldo Rivera's famous Al Capone's vault work.
Absolutely. Kevin Flynn, what do you think?
It's giving them that 40 pounds of sugar for the artwork known as diabetes.
Oh, my God. All right. So, Kevin, I have to digress for a second here.
Yeah.
I once went with my kids to the Guggenheim Museum. I don't think you were there.
I know what you're going to say, yes.
And we went to this very special exhibit that was set up, and it was supposed to be this like up and coming artist, and everyone was really excited about it, and it was paid for by some foundation. And we went there, we paid like a bunch of money for the entrance fee to go in, And we went all the way upstairs, like up the ramp, circular thing that they see running up them and Men in Black. And we went all the way up there into this room. And there was literally, and this is the exact right word, literally, I'm using it correctly, an overhead projector like you have in your 4th grade classroom set up on the floor, projecting a slideshow of nothing. There were 2 shoes on the floor filled with concrete. And there was one of those things from a car dealership, like one of those puppets that was filled with air, the giant, like, loopy dolls, and a bunch of extension cords on the floor. And that was it. And it was like the guy had, like, gotten the assignment and he had gotten the commission like 2 months before and then had done a bunch of heroin or something and then forgotten that he was supposed to do it and then like remembered the day before and was like, shit, okay, here's 2 shoes. I'm going to fill them with concrete. Oh, here's a slide projector and here are some extension cords. So I think that is actually the biggest grift in art history.
And the New York Times loved it.
No, they did not. They did not love it. And I felt very vindicated when I read that. All right. We should probably end the show on that note. But before we do, Lara Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We have one submitted by Rebecca this week.
Yay! My first ever cat of the week.
And it's actually a 19-pound mini tiny horse named Peabody.
Have you ever seen a tinier horse?
I have not seen a tinier horse, and we will send the video out, a link in the newsletter. So this little tiny horse is so small that it lives with 3 French bulldogs. I looked this all up because I needed to know the story behind this little tiny horse in San Diego, and he has like special little shoes. They're like tap shoes. So he runs around on his little, with his little French bulldogs, and he's like the same size as the dogs. It's insane.
He lives in the house. He has a little pen.
It's very nice. So the owner, Faith Smith, actually drove across the country to get this little tiny horse because he was born and they're like, oh, he's not going to survive. We're going to euthanize him. And he couldn't walk. Now he can walk. It's a real tearjerker, Toby. Wait till you see the video.
Oh my God. He's not going to survive. Let's euthanize him.
Toby,
the
the dad who looks like Fabio lies on the couch at night watching TV with this tiny horse, like the tiny horse is a cat. The tiny horse is on his lap, lying on his back, and the guy like pets the tiny horse on its tummy. Laura, have you ever seen anything like this?
I have never, and I totally need my cats would love to have a tiny horse.
This is not like a mini horse like you see in a barnyard.
No. It's not like little Sebastian.
No, this horse is the size of a large cat. It is the tiniest fucking horse I have ever seen.
It's adorable.
And it runs around the house with the dogs. It eats out of a bowl. It's like a third of the size of Briscoe. It is the tiniest horse I have ever seen. Even Kevin thinks it's cute and he doesn't even like horses.
Can you train like a gerbil to ride it or something?
It hangs out with the French bulldogs in the yard. Laura, can I just ask you a side question? The dad, the husband, what do you think he does for a living? Because they keep saying the horse wants to go with him for work, but he has this long flowing hair. Is he Fabio? Is he a romance novel model?
But I couldn't decide if he was going to ride on a motorcycle or if he had, because he had something on his knees, like knee pads. I was like, does he work with tile or something? Or
he almost looked like a
motorcycle outfit?
But didn't like a horse person too? He almost looked like a horse, like an equestrian kind of person. All right, anyway.
He should be riding like one of those,
Frisians
horses with the, or the Frisians with the long flowing mane.
100%. You need to investigate Lara Bricker. Follow up next week. All right, Lara Bricker, if people want to submit their...
Hold on.
Yeah.
You trade your legs for angels' wings.
All right, now we got to do criticism and commentary. Otherwise, we cannot use that song in our podcast. Well, I, for one, think that song...
50,000 Candles in the Wind,
I
little
think
Sebastian
that song is a great piece of American art and one of the great songs in the American canon. Kevin, what do you think about that song? Little Sebastian. All right, let's fade that out. All right, so Lara Bricker, if people want to submit their animals, little horses, dogs, cats, to be cat of the week, how can they find you on Twitter?
They can find me at Lara Bricker, and they can send me to San Diego to go see Peabody the Tiny Horse.
I would do anything to see Peabody the Tiny Horse. And by the way, you can also submit your animals at crimewriterson@gmail.com. Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you on Twitter, how can they find you?
There's no point. Our civilization is collapsing. They can find me at Toby Ball NH.
Wow, Toby just made this real dark. Kevin Flynn, what about you? How can folks reach you on... Oh, sound effects! Kevin Flynn, how can folks reach you on Twitter?
And trading your legs for angel's wings. Jesus Christ. I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
If you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On, and I encourage you to join our amazing community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. We also have a regular old Facebook page, but you can ignore that. Just go there to join the group. We will let you in if you're not an asshole. Support the show at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. You will get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, which apparently is hilarious, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. That is 4 shows for the price of 1. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the incredibly astute Olivia Burdett. The executive producer of this program is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement where we keep our own pet mountain lion, but not actually, because Carol Baskin would murder us. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. Oh, my God.
I've had many tweezers stuck up my nose.
Oh, my God. When I had the scissors spun 21 times in my nose, it actually did cure my cancer. Rebecca, what the fuck were you talking about? That's what I was afraid was going to happen in that email.
Partners in Crime Media.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.